November 6, 2014, from Paul Brown Stadium in Cincinnati, Ohio. It was a battle between AFC North rivals, the Cleveland Browns and the Cincinnati Bengals, in the Battle of Ohio. Cleveland won the toss and they elected to defer, so the Browns would be on defense and the Bengals would be on offense as they start things off on their own 20-yard line. And after picking up a first down, they ended up being faced with a 2nd and 10 on their own 30. Andy Dalton dropped back to passing, was intercepted by Robertson. So right away in the first 2 minutes of this game, we have our first turnover. And the Cleveland Browns now would start their first drive in the red zone on the Cincinnati 18-yard line. West then ran for 3 yards, and then West ran for 6 yards, and then West ran for 4 yards, and then West ran for 1 yard. And now it was 2nd and goal on the 4-yard line, and they gave it to Big Ben Tate, who busted up the middle for a 4-yard touchdown run, and the Browns were on the scoreboard with the score 7-0 as they took the early lead. So now the Bengals would take over with less than 11 minutes left in the first quarter. They would start off on their own 20. But then on 3rd and 2 from the 38, after having picked up a first down, Hill got dropped for a 2-yard loss by Dansby and Sheard. There was an unnecessary roughness call, and so that would actually make it 4th and 19. As Little, who had been talking all week, he ended up getting that penalty called against him. And so now that brought out the punting unit. So they punted the ball, but on the punt, the Browns ended up fumbling and the Bengals recovered. So they would now take over on the Browns 32 with less than 8 minutes on the clock. And they would end up getting into the red zone when they went for it on 4th down, and a defensive pass interference call against Skrine would give the Bengals a first down on the Cleveland Browns 19. So they're right there in the red zone, but then a penalty moved them back. And they would end up bringing out Mike Nugent to kick a 43-yard field goal. It was up, it was good, and the Bengals were on the scoreboard as they now trailed the Browns by 4 points with the score 7-3. So now the Browns would take over on their own 12-yard line with about 6 minutes left. They did pick up a first down, but then they ended up having to punt the ball soon after. So now the Bengals would take back over on their own 23. They would also pick up a first down, but they would also end up punting soon after as well. So now, with about 2 minutes left in the first, the Browns took over on their own 41. They would end up bringing the ball across midfield when Hoyer hit Benjamin for a 17-yard pass on 2nd and 8 from the 43 to bring it to the Cincinnati 40. And then on 2nd and 6 from the 36, West picked up a first down with a 6-yard run that brought the first quarter to a close. So after 1 quarter of play, the score was Cleveland 7, Cincinnati 3. So now to begin things in the second quarter, the Browns had the ball on the Cincinnati 30, and on 2nd and 10 from the 30, Hoyer would end up hitting Benjamin, this time for a 22-yard pass, and that would make it 1st and goal on the Cincinnati 8-yard line. Crowell then ran for 6 yards, and then on 2nd and goal from the 2, Crowell punched it in from 2 yards out, going off the right tackle. So the touchdown now made it 14-3 as the Browns extended their lead. So now the Bengals would take over without 13 minutes left before halftime. They picked up a first down on their first play of the possession, but then on 1st and 10 from the 47, Hill would run for 13 yards, but then he fumbled as Gibson forced the fumble and Hayden recovered. Gibson usually known for his interceptions, but here he forces the fumble. And so now the Browns would take over on their own 28. They would go 3 and out and punt the ball to the Bengals. The Bengals would also go 3 and out, and they punted it back to the Browns, who now took over with about 10 minutes left in the second quarter. They had the ball on their own 23, and they were faced actually with a 3rd and 8 from the 25, and Hoyer hit Gabriel for a 15-yard pass that brought the ball to the 40. And then on 2nd and 6 from the 44, Hoyer hit Barnage for an 18-yard pass to bring the ball across midfield into the Cincinnati 38. They ended up picking up a couple more first downs, and they were actually faced with a 3rd and 1 on the Cincinnati 19, and Hoyer ended up taking it himself for that one after they had already picked up a first down a couple plays earlier off a pass, actually off a run by Crowell. So now there they are in the red zone, and they ended up stalling, and Cundiff would come out to kick a 32-yard field goal, and it was now 17-3 Browns over the Bengals as they extended their lead to 2 touchdowns. So now Cincinnati would take over, and they would end up going 3 and out, and the Browns got the ball right back. Now with about 2.5 minutes left before halftime, they had the ball on their own 21. They brought the ball up to the 47, but then their drive stalled, and they would end up punting the ball back to the Bengals. The Bengals went 3 and out as they ended the first half, and going into the locker rooms at halftime, the score was Cleveland 17, Cincinnati 3. So now to start things off in the third quarter, the Browns would have the ball first. They would go 3 and out on their first possession of the second half. Now the Bengals would get the ball on their own 28, and although they did end up bringing it up to the 39, they then started going back and back as Andy Dalton was sacked on 2nd and 10 for a 5-yard loss by Bryant and Williams, and then he was sacked on 3rd and 15, this time by Bryant himself, and now that brought up 4th and 24 from the 25, so they punted the ball to the Cleveland Browns. The Browns took over on their own 37 with about 10 minutes left in the third quarter. They would bring the ball across midfield and into Cincinnati territory. They would be faced with a 2nd and 10 on the Cincinnati 31, and Hoyer would hit Barnage for a 28-yard pass to make it a 1st and goal on the 3. Then 2 plays later, they gave the ball to Terrence West, and he went into the end zone for a 1-yard touchdown, but wait, he fumbled it. There was a lot of craziness, confusion. It went to the booth, and it was ruled a touchdown as he broke the plane. All you have to do is break that white line there. You get over the ball, over that white line, it's a touchdown. Doesn't matter what happens then. The ball came loose after he broke the plane, and so the score now was Cleveland 24, Cincinnati 3, as the Browns were now up by 3 touchdowns, as each of their backs had now scored a touchdown in this game on the ground. So now the Bengals had the ball with about a little less than 5 minutes left on the clock. They had it on their own 29. They were then faced with a 3rd down from the 34, and Dalton hit Gresham for a 15-yard pass. And that brought them to the 49, but that's where their drive stalled. They would punt the ball. The Browns would now take over, backed up against their own end zone on their own 3-yard line with just 3.5 minutes left in the third. They would get out of the shadow of their end zone and bring the ball up to the 37. It was 2nd and 10 on the 37. Ben Tate then ran for 8 yards, and the third quarter came to a close, and after 3 quarters of play, the score was Cleveland 24, Cincinnati 3. So now to begin things in the fourth quarter, Cleveland had the ball on their own 45, and they would not pick up the first down, and they would punt the ball in the second play of the fourth quarter. So now the Cincinnati Bengals took over on their own 20, and they started to march towards midfield, and they ended up with a 1st and 10 on the 41, where Dalton hit Sanu for an 18-yard pass that brought it into Cleveland territory at the 41. Then a few plays later, it was 3rd and 3 on the Cleveland 34, and Andy Dalton dropped back to pass, and he was intercepted by Buster Skrine. Buster Skrine gets the big pick. And now the Browns took over on the Cincinnati 43. They would end up getting into field goal range, and Billy Cundiff came out to attempt a 44-yard field goal. It was up, and it was no good. So the score remained 24-3, and the Bengals took back over with about 8 minutes left in this game, trailing by 3 touchdowns. But then, on 3rd and 15 from the 29, Dalton drops back to pass, and Buster Skrine comes up with his 2nd interception in as many possessions. So, back-to-back possessions for the Bengals turn out in interceptions for Buster Skrine. And so now the Browns took over on their own 19 with 7 minutes left. They hit up a little bit of clock, but after 5 plays, they punted the ball. So now the Bengals took over with 4.5 minutes left, but after 5 plays, they would punt the ball. And so now the Browns would get the ball back with a little less than 4 minutes left on the clock. They went 3 and out. They punted the ball back to Cincinnati, but now there was less than 2 minutes left. They trailed by 3 touchdowns. They wouldn't get anything really going. And so this game came to a close, and the Battle of Ohio ends in a victory for the Cleveland Browns as they win this game with the final score, Cleveland 24, Cincinnati 3. And with the victory, the Browns are now 6-3. They're tied with the Steelers for first place in the AFC North. Of course, the Steelers do play Sunday, and with a a victory in New York against the Jets, they would be back in first by a half a game. But if the Steelers somehow lose, the Browns would be all by their lonesomes up in first place. They are there right now, at least for a couple of days. The Bengals, with the loss, are now 5-3-1 on the season, and this is their first home loss in the regular season in a few years. They haven't lost in the regular season since, I believe, 2013, if I'm correct. In this game, though, Brian Hoyer was 15 for 23 with 198 passing yards. Andy Dalton was 10 for 33 with 86 passing yards and 3 interceptions. Dalton ran for 8 yards off of 3 carries. The leading rusher in this game was Terrence West. He had 94 yards off of 26 carries and a touchdown. Crowell and Tate each had touchdowns as well. Jeremy Hill had 55 yards off of 12 carries to be the leading rusher for the Bengals. The leading receiver in the game was Miles Austin with 48 yards off of 5 receptions. Barnridge was the second most receiver with 46 yards off of just 2 receptions. Benjamin also had 46 yards off of 3 receptions. And the leading receiver for Cincinnati was their tight end Gresham, who had 29 yards off of 3 receptions. The leading tackler in this game was Emmanuel Lamur for the Cincinnati Bengals. He had 11 tackles. Nico Johnson had 10 tackles, and Vincent Rey also had 10 tackles. The Bengals did not get any sacks, and they got no interceptions. The Browns' leading tackler was Karlos Dansby with 8 tackles. And Desmond Bryant had 2 sacks in this game. They had 3 interceptions. Buster Skrine had 2 interceptions, and Robertson had 1 interception. The Browns' defense comes up huge in this game as they shut down the Bengals. They hold them to just 3 points. And the running game, each running back had a touchdown. Tate, Isaiah Crowell, and Terrence West. Very impressive win for the Browns on the road against their in-state division rivals there in the AFC North. So they now take a part of first place with the Steelers. And as I said, the Steelers play on Sunday, so we'll see what happens in a couple of days. It might just be for a few days. The Steelers have not yet had their bye week, whereas the Browns and Bengals each had their bye week back in week 4. But the Browns come up with a big win. And the final score, Cleveland 24, Cincinnati 3.